In this video, I'm going to walk through building the organization chart and then tying those objects to the BPMN lane. So to start with, I'm going to double click on the organization and create a new view underneath. And then once I get to that view, I'm going to change the current model to be the organization model. All right, now that I have the organization model selected, if I open up my drawing toolbar, and that's under Tools, drawing toolbar. If I open up my drawing toolbar, you notice we don't have any objects here. So I need to create some objects. And the way we do that is under sysadmin, manage models. And then in the organization model, right now there's no objects there. I'm going to right click and say new object. So I'm going to create a new object and I'll call it department. And then maybe I want another object. Maybe I want an organization, so like a bigger unit there. Right, and we'll just have those two for now. Once you've defined the visual appearance of an object, you need to associate it with a class. I'm going to double click on organization to see the list of classes. And when the list of classes pop up, I notice that there isn't really an org unit in my list of classes. So I'm going to go ahead and create one. So I'm going to right click anywhere on there and do new class. And I'm going to call this new class org unit because these objects are going to belong to a generic org unit. And now that I have that, I'm going to right click on org unit and do new attribute. So I have a new attribute. So maybe I have department head. I might also have a new attribute contact, perhaps. And maybe I have a org subview. So I want to go down to a more detailed organization view underneath. And then the other thing I usually like to add is the template, the spec sheets. We'll call this template 1. So let's start with the org subview. Double click to define the attribute. And instead of a simple attribute, I'm going to have this be a subview. So I'm going to go down to another view. And the model I'm going to use for this is organization. So this is going to be a decomposition of the organization. So we'll save that. And then double click on template. This is going to be the spec sheet template. This is the form the user is going to type in. I'll save my changes so that I can customize it. And then first of all, I'm going to resize this. That is huge. So let's resize this, make it a little smaller there. And then I'll click on my check mark up here. That's going to bring up the list of attributes. They're way over there on my screen. I usually put the item name on everything just because it's nice for the users to know what they're looking at. They can't change the item name through the spec sheet. They have to do that by right clicking. That's a special field, but it's still nice for them to see it here. And then to contact, department head, I'm going to drag that on there. And then after I've put the attributes on there, I usually like to put some buttons on. I'm going to click on the little OK button there, and that'll bring up my button bar here. And usually I put a save button, a cancel button, a check-in, check-out button, and then maybe a select subview button as well. And then once I've got those on there, I'm going to do a bounding rectangle there around them and hit my align button to smart align them to the top. All right, that's good enough for that. Let's go ahead and save that. Exit out of there. I'm going to save and then pause right here in my manage models. So I have the class defined, but I need to associate it with these objects. So right click, assign class, and I'm going to pick that new org unit class that I just created. So these are going to belong to the org unit class. So they're going to inherit all of those attributes that I just defined. Okay, there we go. All right, I'm going to save that. And so when I come back out here to my org chart, I didn't define any connectors, so I'm not going to be able to connect any of these things up. But for now, we could draw like here's a big organization, and then maybe we have some departments underneath. Drop some of those guys on. And just like so, maybe I'll switch back to pointer tool here. Home button. Actually, let's go to tools. Maybe I will align some of those. Top, there we are. Just line them up real quick. Okay, let's give them some names. So I'm going to call this one IT. This is my IT department. Maybe we'll call this one sales. I'm just going to create some right here real quick. Call this one marketing. There we go. All right, so now I have some actual objects defined in my org unit class. Let's go back to the top. So we've started to build our org chart. Now let's link it to our BPMN model. And just for the purposes of this demo, I put a BPMN model over here so we could play around with it. So right now in the BPMN model, you have a pool and you have a lane, and the lane is tied to the stakeholder class. For this example, we're going to create a new type of lane. So if I go into System Admin, Manage Models, and here's all of the objects, and one of the objects that I have is the stakeholder lane. Now in your example, it's just called lane. All I did was right click on it and I renamed it to be called stakeholder lane because I'm going to create another type of lane and I want it to have a different name. So now that I have stakeholder name, I'm going to click and drag just a little bit, not very far. And when I let go, I get this dialog box here, and instead of discard, I'm going to change that to duplicate. So I want to create another one just like it. So now I have two of them. Let's rename this one. And I'm going to call this organization lane. Now I need to associate it with the organization class. Right now it belongs to stakeholder because I copied it from the other one. So I'm going to right click and do assign class, and I'm going to change that class assignment to be my org unit. I'm going to tie it to the same class that those objects belong to in my org chart. Okay, one more thing I'm going to do. If you look off to the left here, you can see I have this organized for the user. The way that we organize that are by these folders here. So I'm going to take that organization lane that I just made, and I want to put one of those in the swim lanes folder. That way it will appear with the other swim lanes for my user. I can also rearrange things here. So if I want organization lane to appear in between pool and stakeholder lane, I'll just rearrange it so that they're in that order, and that's the order the user will see them in. All right, let's take a look at that. Hit save. And now in my palette here on the left, I'm going to scroll down till I get to just a little further there, swim lanes, and you'll see they're in the order that I just put them. And here's that new organization lane that I just made. So I'm going to drag that onto the diagram, drop it. Oops, I did the wrong thing there. Let's try something different on that. Control Z, undo. So organization lane, this right here means I'm going to change the type of the pool, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to move over until I get this cursor here with the little down arrow. That means I'm actually dropping it into the picture, and it put those two together. I'm going to rearrange them so they're a little bit bigger. And once you play around with the lanes, you'll kind of see how they work. So now I have an organization lane. Oh, let's make stakeholder lane a little bit bigger. He's kind of squished there. There we go. And if I right click on there, go to name item, now I can either start typing in a new name, or if I click pick item, here's the list of all the ones that exist in the repository. So these are those departments that I just drew on that other diagram. So let's say I want this to be the IT lane. I'll pick that right there, click OK. And so now this organization lane is linked to that IT class, or sorry, that IT object that appears on the other diagram. So that's how we have linked those two together. So they both point to that same object in the repository. One is just viewed as a lane on this diagram, and the other one, let me pull up another view here. The other one is linked to our org chart, but they are the exact same object. So let's do a quick little example here. So if I go into IT and I open up my spec sheet, there's that spec sheet that I created. My contact is Lisa Cates, save that. And then if I go back over to my BPMN diagram, here is my swim lane. If I right click and bring up the spec sheet on my lane, you'll see it's IT, contact Lisa Cates. It's the same object in the repository, so we have linked those two together. All right,